Chapter 3. Hate. When my grandma Scruggs died, her 2 surviving children showed up to the funeral in their sweatpants. My aunt was chewing gum during the sermon, and I caught her brother checking his watch more than once. Before the service, the preacher had approached the 2 of them sympathetically, said he was sorry for their loss, and asked if they could share some fond memories of their mother that he could use to pad out the eulogy. Both of them thought about it, and both said, "Sorry, Reverend, we got nothing." If you imagine a preschool drawing of a sweet grandmother, you'll get close to imagining my Grandma Scruggs. She had rosy dimples and kind eyes. She cooed when she talked, and she laughed softly and often. She co-ran a neighborhood credit union with her husband, and they were pillars of their community. They were high-ranking in their church and admirable philanthropists. Hardly a day went by without someone knocking on their front door to pay their respects. I was in my 30s when she died. After the funeral, I drove my aunt home. Her apartment was small and plain and dark. It was decorated similar to her mother's home, with ceramic angels and framed Bible quotes, all of it as clean as an operating room. My aunt was still chewing her funeral gum when she sat down in her recliner and turned on the TV to NCIS, as if she had just returned from the post office, not her mother's burial. During a commercial break, I asked her how she was holding up. Her arm was bleeding again, I noticed. Whenever my aunt discovered a new freckle, she would compulsively pick at it until it was replaced by a bloody crater. "Fine," my aunt said, and she rocked in her recliner. She was quiet for a minute, then said, "I think Ma's in hell right now." She looked off distantly, her teeth still smacking away, and she added, "I feel bad about saying that, but I also don't. I guess I feel bad that I don't feel bad enough." I didn't try to reassure her. My Grandma Scruggs was a product of her environment, a cube of ice floating in the holy water it was taken from. The town we lived in was constructed by the infamous Baptist preacher Jerry Falwell, the man who started the American moral majority and referred to civil rights as civil wrongs. He and my grandma are in the same yearbook together. She even dated his twin brother at some point, and she spoke of Jerry fondly whenever his name came up. Reverend Falwell was a round, booming man who was a bewitching mix of jolly charm and the incendiary rhetoric of a grand dragon. He was like a clean-shaven Santa in a suit, with rosy cheeks and well-worn laugh lines around his eyes, who smiled warmly as he said things such as, and I quote, "The true Negro does not want integration. He realizes his potential is far better among his own race, and that integration will destroy our race eventually." And, "AIDS is not just God's punishment for homosexuals, but God's punishment for a society that tolerates homosexuals." And, because of the pagans and the abortionists and the feminists and the gays and the lesbians who are actively trying to make that an alternative lifestyle, all of them who have tried to secularize America, I point the finger in their face and say, you helped 9/11 happen. As hateful as these sound, because they were, The sentiments were always painted in a clean coat of wholesomeness and grandfatherly compassion. This style of evangelism was summarized quite succinctly in Falwell's catchphrase of, "We hate the sin, but we love the sinner." It's this weird marriage of love and hate that puts the two feelings on equal moral footing while also making them harder to tell apart. This sweet and sour interpretation of Jesus' teachings was so wildly successful, Reverend Falwell was able to accumulate enough donations and tax breaks to turn our modest hometown into a Christian Epcot Center, with his empire leading to attractions like a 4-season ski slope, for Christ, a $25 million 17-story tall Freedom Tower, for Christ, and a 490-acre gun range and armory, for Christ. The entire land became a fantastical vision of what America could be if those killjoy liberals would just stop ruining the fun for the rest of us. Like Jerry Falwell, my grandma knew what being a saint was supposed to look like, so she focused all of her efforts on maintaining the appearance of sainthood. Anything that appeared holy was holy, and therefore anything that appeared short of perfect was evil. It twisted reality until black was white and white was black. Her hate was love, and her love was hate. Grandma Scruggs kept her home pristine and welcoming. Her kitchen was themed like roosters, her bedroom was themed like angels, and her living room was themed like baby dolls. Whenever I would visit as a child, she would offer me a Dixie cup of frozen grapes and tell me how handsome I was. Once, when I was a teen, I had forgotten to take off my hat when I went indoors, which was one of her house rules. Rather than politely remind me to take it off, which would have made her look like the bad guy, she smiled, hugged me, and as she was squeezing me, she whispered in my ear, "Those hats are the reason you're going bald." I could hear her tongue snapping against her teeth with that last syllable, trying her hardest to make the word sting. Then she let go of me and said, loudly, "Oh, you're so handsome." I wasn't going bald, but after that comment, I wasn't so sure anymore. Ironically, I became so obsessed with my perceived premature balding that I became too self-conscious to take my hat off in school, getting written up more than once for it. There was one Sunday when my family arrived at her house for post-church lunch. I was looking pretty fly in my church clothes, with my hair cut clean and combed. During sermon that morning, bored as I sat in the pew, I had decided to roll up the cuffs of my slacks. Not by much, just enough to flaunt some sock. It looked great, and I was considering incorporating it into my first signature style. When my grandma saw me that afternoon, she hugged me and smiled sweetly and called me handsome. Then she said, "Oh, honey, I've got a present for you in my room. Come with me real quick." So I said, "Yes, ma'am," just as I had been taught, like infantry, and was lured away from the flock. Once we were in private, she dropped her smile, and her face transformed into the foulest expression of hatred I had ever seen on a person. I was paralyzed by how little she looked like my grandmother. With fierce snaps of my khakis, she undid the rolls I had made. "Don't you ever come into my house again with your pants cuffed like that," she said. "That's what dykes do." I had no idea what that word meant, I honestly thought she was accusing me of being Dutch or something, but I gathered it wasn't great. Once my pants were straightened out, the smile came back to her face instantaneously, like one of those Halloween portraits that shows two different faces as you walk past it. She lovingly caressed the side of my head, and we walked back into the living room together. She never did give me a present, and I never did cuff my pants again. I have vague memories of Grandma trying to convince me my name was Cody, which has never once been my name. I later learned that she hated my birth name. She demanded that my parents change it to something more orthodox. They refused. So Grandma tried to trick me into thinking Cody was actually my real name all along, hoping that if I started to refer to myself as Cody, my parents would have to do the same. It didn't work, thank God. However, I never did feel like my actual name belonged to me, so perhaps the suggestion did more damage than I realized. Grandma Scruggs also had a tendency to corner me and my brother so she could hypnotize us. She'd close the door behind her when the other adults weren't paying attention, and she'd tell us something over and over again until it felt true. She was always trying to turn us against my sister, I remember. "You boys are so sweet," she'd say with a smile. "You boys don't talk bad about your family. Not like she does. You don't want to turn out like her, do you? Do you? Do you? You know she says things about you when you're not around, right? Right? Stuff like that. My grandmother had such a reputation for deceit in my family that when she developed dementia, we hesitated to believe her. While her neighbors and friends were concerned after she was found walking by the road at night in just one sock and no shoes, saying she was looking for the refrigerator, our family squinted our eyes, thinking it was just another one of her attempts at manipulation. "You just never knew what was real with her," my aunt told me once. "She'd mess with your head, Kaye. I'm still messed up by it, and she's not even alive anymore. It's gotten to the point where I can't tell if I'm the crazy one or she was." Grandma Scruggs seemed to loathe other women, especially within her own family. My sister refuses to revisit any memories of her, only ever referring to her as Doris, spitting the name up like a hairball. My mom refuses to speak ill of the dead, yet she also has nothing kind to say about her late mother-in-law. But my aunt got it the worst, being Grandma's only daughter. When my aunt was a child, her mother would pretend she didn't have a daughter. If my aunt's name would come up in conversation, her mom would act like she didn't know who everyone was talking about. Sometimes she would give the girl the silent treatment for weeks at a time. As a teenager, my aunt would often come home to find the doors locked and her belongings packed in suitcases on the lawn. Not that my aunt ever did anything wrong. She was as loyal and obedient as a hunting dog. One night, though, my aunt was 10 minutes past her curfew, and her mother was so enraged she tried to throttle the teenage girl to death, screaming. Grandpa Scruggs had to physically pry his wife's hands off her. When my aunt was of marrying age, she fell madly in love with an army guy. They wrote lots of love letters to each other, and they dated for a long time. He promised to marry her and take her away from that awful house as soon as he could. However, Grandma started intercepting the love letters, and as soon as she caught wind of his plans to take her daughter away, Grandma proceeded to demolish the relationship by writing back to him, pretending to be my aunt. My aunt figured all this out only after it was too late. He broke it off in a long letter, stating something about how it is apparent you need your mother more than you need me. She never saw him again, and no one ever rescued her. My aunt, all these decades later, still keeps his love letters in a small box under her bed. I'm trying to forgive her, my aunt told me. And I know this don't make sense, but I know everything she did because she loved me. Which might be true. Because my grandmother was always gushing to strangers about how wonderful her daughter was. Just never when her daughter was in the same room. The funeral was the first time I had seen my uncle in probably 15 years. He and his family had been banished by my grandmother for reasons no one talked about. It was Thanksgiving, I was playing with my cousins, and then we heard my uncle shout, "That's it!" to his mother. And, suddenly, my cousins were shepherded back into the van before we had even sat down to eat. My grandma immediately went back to stuffing the turkey and commenting on how cute the dogs were this year in the Westminster Dog Show. I never saw my cousins again after that day. Whatever had happened, my family took my grandmother's side. Because family is family, they said, and you never abandon your family, no matter how eccentric they are. Everyone knew how Grandma was. The only thing that separates family from anyone else was the obligation to put up with each other. My father was especially upset by his brother for not being able to swallow his pride and make amends. So was my aunt, who had endured a lot from my grandma, including a near-miss second-degree murder. Over my life, I had only heard negative stories about my uncle and his family. They were pathetic relatives. The wife was a manipulator who ran the house with an iron fist, and the husband was a cowardly man who fell in line with his wife's rule. All they cared about was money. The only person in my family who ever talked kindly about them was my Grandma Scruggs, who spoke about her son's unprovoked abandonment with confusion and pity. She didn't understand it, but she loved him and prayed for him anyway. I'm still not sure where the negative gossip about him originated, though. At the funeral, I shook hands with my uncle, reintroduced myself, and we made plans to catch up over pizza at his house. As it turns out, both he and his wife are some of the sweetest people. My aunt is an art teacher, and my uncle is an anxious softy. 2 of their 3 kids are pastors now. One of them stopped by that night with his fiancée and their new puppy. They were funny people, and I recognized a lot of myself in them. I retroactively missed their presence over all the years. I couldn't help but ask about the Great Thanksgiving Split. My uncle was not as tight-lipped about it as the rest of the family. He revealed that leading up to that event, he had caught Grandma Scruggs on numerous occasions telling his children lies about their own mother, secretly trying to turn his kids against his wife, which the kids were reluctant to do. They like their mom. At Thanksgiving, the grandchildren tried to give Grandma Scruggs a hug, but she acted like they didn't exist, literally looking around and saying, "Does anyone hear something?" The silent treatment towards his kids was her retribution for their disloyalty to her. He goes to therapy once a week now, making him unique among our family in that regard. According to my uncle, most of his sessions are about his mother, and he still feels immense guilt for leaving the family even after all these years. But I had to choose my kids, he told me. I had no choice. To this day, none of the adults in my family have forgiven him for being so selfish. Around the time when my grandma began deploying her hypnosis on me, something weird started happening to my body. I started to lose contact with it. I could still see it, I could touch it, I could close my eyes and feel it. But it felt foreign somehow. Like when someone's voice in a movie is out of sync with their lips. All I could do was try not to think about it. The same phenomenon bled over into my reflection. Whenever I made eye contact with myself, I would get this feeling of seasickness, or even goosebumps, as if the person on the other side of the mirror wasn't me, but a doppelganger. I remembered not wanting any mirrors in my room, and sometimes I'd put a shirt or a towel over the bathroom mirror, just to make the space more comfy, as I thought of it, when really I didn't want strangers staring at me. I started to feel scared of cameras. Whenever someone pointed a camera at me, I'd physically feel it on my body, the way you feel it when someone is staring at the back of your head. Even as young as kindergarten, I had developed a reputation for ruining the Christmas family photos. As soon as the camera was about to flash, I would hide or twist my face or pretend to sneeze. Something about a camera made me self-conscious in a way that I hated. It immortalized me in a way I didn't like, nor could I explain. It didn't take long for me to realize that if I was the one taking the pictures, then I couldn't be subjected to having my picture taken. Taken is actually the perfect word for it, like a kidnapping. I adopted the same policy for cameras that I had for guns. I don't like them, but I'd rather be behind one than in front of it. My first camera was a toy Ninja Turtles one. All of the developed photos would have a Donatello watermark burned into it. The camera felt comfortable, familiar. It experienced the world exactly as I was starting to. Remotely, unintrusively, voyeuristically. It also made everything feel more real. As I doubted God, I also began to doubt the world He created. But when I held a photograph in my hand, it made everything seem real again, like irrefutable evidence. I recognized photos of my family as photos of my family. I recognized photos of my friends as photos of my friends, photos of my dogs as photos of my dogs. But whenever I saw a photo of me, I had no idea who that boy was. Every photograph felt real, except for the pictures of him. This is when I began my lifelong habit of bending back my portraits until a crease would form, mercifully obscuring my face like a scar.